Joining us now is the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, a Republican of South Dakota. Mr. Leader, welcome back to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Guy. Always good to be with you.
So just earlier this afternoon, not long ago at all, there was a vote on the Senate floor. This was on DHS funding. What happened?
Well, this morning's vote it was a Democrat essentially rejection of what I think was a very reasonable extension of the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill that we were trying to get passed to be able to keep the government open. So very disappointing. This is another completely avoidable shutdown, but it does make you start to question, Guy, the Democrats' motivation. There have been productive conversations taking place between Republicans and Democrats on this final funding bill for DHS, and the Dems, at least right now, are choosing to walk away. Now, it'd be one thing, we had a vote to fund it, so every Republican will be on the record having voted to fund it. The Democrats all voted no, and subsequent to that, we actually asked unanimous consent, which in the Senate is a way of trying to expedite something, to allow from a traditional time to negotiate, and they blocked even that. So it's starting to feel more and more like, this is the Democrats just really don't want a solution. They want a political issue, which is what happened last fall during that long 43-day shutdown. So it's all about, again, for us, making it easier and safer for federal law enforcement officers to do their jobs. And clearly the Democrats have a different view of that.
So they're not even open to a brief extension like a CR to allow these negotiations to play out? They block that too?
Correct. And, we had said at the very outset of this that they had insisted on a 2-week window in order to negotiate this. And I told them that it takes 2 weeks just to get something across the Senate floor, let alone negotiate and strike a deal. And, of course, it took them 10 days to submit their list of demands. The White House turned around and, pretty much 48 hours came back with a counter proposal. So there's been some paper trading back and forth. But what I can tell you, having watched all this, is that the White House, I think, has been very reasonable, and they have moved a long way in terms of, trying to reach an agreement here that would keep the government open. But the very idea that the Democrats wouldn't even allow us to extend the time to negotiate and to strike that deal, before they shut the government down suggests, I think, again, that they're not real sincere or serious about trying to solve this and to fund the government, but rather to try and score some political points by not doing it.
This would be the Democrats' second government shutdown in just a matter of months. There was the longest one in history, the Schumer shutdown last year that you mentioned. Here comes another one, it seems. But this one will be different because it's much more narrow, right? Republicans have actually passed almost all of the appropriations bills to fund the government. So this would just be DHS, which is not to say that's not important. There's a lot of things that can be impacted by that. But much of the government, most of it, is now funded. That being said, the Democrats seem to want to be forcing the issue on DHS because they're angry about federal enforcement of immigration laws, which they seem to be against. They want to signal how angry they are at ICE. They can't defund ICE because ICE is funded for the next 3 years under the one big beautiful law that you guys passed last year. So this is their leverage, I guess, they think, to try to make a stink and perform for their base that they're doing something on ICE. My sense of the demands that they made were, most of them were just totally ludicrous non-starters. Maybe they were starting to soften on certain things. The White House was making some concessions. Why not just continue to have those discussions while there's a temporary funding bill? I don't understand why you'd be against that.
Yeah, I mean, that one's really hard to explain, Guy. I get why they didn't want to vote for the House-passed bill, although it had significant reforms in it, including body cameras, de-escalation training, more oversight of ICE. There were a lot of things in there that they had asked for that were actually in that bill that they voted against today. But then the idea that they wouldn't even allow additional time to negotiate is really, it's very telling. And I think, the original deal, which we did vote on today was bipartisan. I mean, it was negotiated by Democrats and Republicans. They walked away from it. They used Minnesota as the excuse for that. But then you have, Tom Homan, as recently as this morning, coming out and saying that they're pulling all the ICE agents out of Minneapolis. And so it's just, it's really hard to explain. I mean, I think it's going to be on them to explain why they want to, once again, defund law enforcement in this country. And then it's so much more than that. I mean, it's, you got Coast Guard in there, cybersecurity, TSA, FEMA, some really important and crucial national security agencies that are also affected by this bill.
I do find it very rich that, as you just pointed out, literally this morning, the border czar, Tom Homan, announced, and we'll play some of the audio later, that almost all of this federal surge is going to leave Minneapolis. Some will remain to investigate fraud and to do some of the basic things that they have to do, but most of the officers are going away because they've reached this accommodation in some sort of acceptable homeostasis. So the excuse that Democrats have to cause this partial shutdown was actually erased this morning, and then they still voted this way anyway. I mean, it's obviously politics.
It is, and it's unfortunate because you're using all these employees at some of these key agencies as collateral for what is yet another harmful government shutdown, and one that they own. I mean, this is not like this wasn't negotiated with them. The original bill, the bill we voted on prior to the request to extend the time, included, the provisions, many of which the reforms the Democrats had negotiated.
It was a bipartisan bill.
It was a bipartisan bill. That's right. And then they walked away from that, and now they won't even allow additional time to negotiate a new version of it that would have even some enhanced reforms in it. So it's we're not talking about a good faith effort here. And I will say, I think to be totally fair in this, the administration on this issue has been very accommodating and trying to work and find the deal space and negotiate with Democrats in a way that would get to an outcome. And so far to no avail. So you have to ask the hard question about what is this really all about for the Democrats, and it seems to be about politics.
Do you think they might get another bite at the apple here? Could you guys, in a non-unanimous consent setting, give them a chance to vote on a 2-week or 4-week CR to buy more time for DHS, or have they totally shut the door on that?
They shut the door on it, and we could do that, but that takes consent right now in the Senate. I mean, otherwise, if you follow normal Senate procedure, you'd have to file cloture on the motion to proceed to that, and that would take several days, and it wouldn't ripen until next week. And so, I mean, and they made it very clear that they were going to object to any attempt to extend this. And so we did it in the form of a unanimous consent request, which, again, is a way of, if there is consent to do something like this, which should have been a no-brainer, allow that to happen without having to go through the normal Senate procedure. But the Democrats objected to it on the floor. It was a very spirited debate. Katie Britt was leading it on our side. And but the Democrats made it very clear. This is, again, part of it is, I think, too, guys, and I don't believe this represents necessarily every Democrat. I just think it's their far left, the progressive wing of their party, their base, all these special interest groups out there. I think so often now what the Democrats do on the floor of the United States Senate is a lot more about keeping MoveOn.org happy than it is about actually solving problems. Totally,
yeah, I mean,
totally.
You
tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, maybe in their heart of hearts, some of them don't want to be doing this, but ultimately it's how you vote and what you do. And if they're being led around by these left-wing groups, then this is what they have to own. These are the choices that they're making. I do want to ask you about the SAVE Act, the Save America Act. Your counterpart, Chuck Schumer, has called it Jim Crow 2.0, a familiar smear, another lie that they told about the Georgia law not long ago. They've resurrected it here. What's interesting is they are using on the Democrat side the filibuster, which they've also called Jim Crow, in order to block and forestall the SAVE Act, which they call wrongly Jim Crow. So there's just a lot of this Jim Crow rhetoric flying around, tons of hypocrisy. Is there any path forward for that legislation in the Senate?
We will make sure that they get a chance to vote on it and defend their position of not caring about or being willing to say, at least, that non-citizens should not be able to vote in our elections. I mean, that's really what this is. It's very straightforward. I think it's a clear-cut issue, and yes, it is not the extreme radical rhetoric around this that they use is totally missing the point that this is an 80 to 90% issue with the American people. Everybody believes that only citizens ought to be able to vote in our elections. And so, we will put them on record on that. The talking filibuster is another issue which probably warrants a broader discussion in terms of what happens if you head down that road. But one way or the other, the Dems need to defend a position that essentially is opposed to the idea that it only ought to be citizens voting in our elections.
Yeah, Senator, I would love to get you back on this show sometime soon to talk about the filibuster, because I am very much in your camp that I don't think it would be wise to change filibuster rules for this bill or any other bill for any number of reasons. But I have conservative, smart friends who say that is folly at this point based on what Democrats have signaled they want to do when they get power back next time. I would love to bounce those ideas off of you at greater length next time you join the program, so I hope we can get you back.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, and that is a good discussion to have, Guy, and I think everybody needs to understand what's at stake. My argument has always been that I don't know what the Democrats are going to do, but, if they want to steal the car, that's one thing, but we don't want to hand them the keys to the car, and there's a lot of bad stuff that could happen if the filibuster goes away. One of the reasons, it's protected conservatives way more throughout its history than it has liberals, and I think the real risk and danger, of course, and by the way, I have these conversations with Democrats all the time. I'm not convinced in the end that they're going to do it, but that's the best argument that those who are advocating for getting rid of the filibuster have, and that is, well, the Democrats are going to do it anyway. Why wouldn't we do it? I don't think we want to have our fingerprints on all the nasty stuff they're going to do if they ever get to where they can pass their agenda at 51 votes in the Senate.
Well,
yeah.
I want to explore that exact point, especially those private conversations with Democrats, to the extent that you can talk about it in depth next time we talk. But for now, I know it's a very busy day for you. We're so grateful that you made time for us. Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota on the Guy Benson Show. Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Thanks, Guy. Good talking with you.